Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief. Today we're following up on the dust-up and hullabaloo surrounding the backstop comments from OpenAI last week and expanding the discussion out to ask what the government's role with AI should actually be. It's pretty clear to me, observing this field every day, that we are moving into a more intensely political era for AI. Now, part of that is just where we are in the US election cycle. We have the midterms coming up. And right now in particular, there is a moment of exploration among many politicians to figure out what it is they think potential voters are going to want to hear. And there are certainly early indications that a more populist economic message is going to be popular. Still, even if it weren't for that, the politics of AI were always inevitably going to come into focus as the technology got more powerful and as we started to see its impacts play out in the world. At the end of last week, OpenAI published a blog post about the next phase of AI, but to properly contextualize it, I actually want to go back to those comments from OpenAI CFO Sarah Friar and Sam Altman himself that kicked off such a storm last week. Now, for those of you who weren't paying attention last week, in a conversation at a Wall Street Journal conference, OpenAI CFO Sarah Friar was having a conversation about what she thought the role of government should be in this broader compute build-out, with regard also to how it related to geopolitics vis-a-vis China, and she unfortunately reached for the word backstop as a way to describe the government's role. Now, it wasn't just an errant word. She also talked about the US government guaranteeing loans to bring down the cost of capital. And all of this dovetailed with comments from Sam Altman on a podcast with Tyler Cowen from earlier in the week, where he also talked about the government as the insurer of last resort when it came to things as big as AI. And as you might imagine, given how contentious a lot of this OpenAI deal-making is already, and how much skepticism there is in markets that they'll be able to pull off these lofty ambitions, anything that hinted that the company might already be looking for a bailout, even though that was not a term that they used, was enough to send the news editors into overdrive. And as sometimes happens, what was initially a very short statement led to a ton of follow-up words to try to clarify. On Thursday afternoon of last week, Sam Altman tweeted, "I would like to clarify a few things," which ended up being a 1,000-word tweet. Altman started, "First, the obvious one. We do not have or want government guarantees for OpenAI data centers. We believe that governments should not pick winners or losers, and that taxpayers should not bail out companies that make bad business decisions or otherwise lose in the market. If one company fails, other companies will do good work." He continued, though, "What we do think might make sense is governments building and owning their own AI infrastructure. But then the upside of that should flow to the government as well. We can imagine a world where governments decide to offtake a lot of computing power and get to decide how to use it, and it may make sense to provide lower cost of capital to do so. Building a strategic national reserve of computing power makes a lot of sense, but this should be for the government's benefit, not for the benefit of private companies." Now, just a couple hours before this, White House AI czar David Sachs made the position of the administration pretty clear. There will be no federal bailout for AI. The US has at least 5 major frontier model companies. If one fails, others will take its place. Sachs continued, "That said, we do want to make permitting and power generation easier. The goal is rapid infrastructure build-out without increasing residential rates for electricity." Now, Sachs also added, "Finally, to give the benefit of the doubt, I don't think anyone was actually asking for a bailout. That would be ridiculous." But company executives can clarify their own comments. Now, one area where Altman got a little bit more specific, as part of his clarification, was around US infrastructure build-out. He wrote, "The one area where we have discussed loan guarantees is as part of supporting the build-out of semiconductor fabs in the US, where we and other companies have responded to the government's call and where we would be happy to help, though we did not formally apply. The basic idea there has been ensuring that the sourcing of the chip supply chain is as American as possible in order to bring jobs and industrialization back to the US and to enhance the strategic position of the US with an independent supply chain for the benefit of all American companies. This is, of course, different from governments guaranteeing private benefit data center buildouts." Now, this is something we've heard from OpenAI before. In a letter last month to the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, they asked the government to extend CHIPS Act subsidies into other necessary infrastructure like transformers for the grid, AI server production, and AI data centers. Now, cutting to the heart of the discussion, Altman flagged that there are 3 questions behind the question that were causing concerns around this idea of a backstop or a bailout. The first question was how OpenAI will pay for $1.4 trillion in infrastructure over the next 8 years. Altman said that revenue for the company is now at a $20 billion run rate, and he expects hundreds of billions of ARR by 2030. Now, this is a big update and is basically 50% more than previously reported numbers when it comes to OpenAI's ARR. Altman covered a range of new products they are looking to build out, including their enterprise offering, robotics, and consumer devices. He said that they also might consider selling compute to other companies along the way if they overbuild. But ultimately, he said, everything we currently see suggests that the world is going to need a great deal more computing power than what we are already planning for. The second question was whether OpenAI was intentionally becoming too big to fail, ergo forcing the government to stand behind them. Altman wrote, "Our answer on this is an unequivocal no. If we screw up and can't fix it, we should fail, and other companies will continue on doing good work and servicing customers. That's how capitalism works, and the ecosystem and economy would be fine. We plan to be a wildly successful company, but if we get it wrong, that's on us." Altman referenced that interview with Tyler Cowen, the one in which he had said that he thinks that the government ends up as the insurer of last resort. In this clarification post, Altman claimed that this wasn't supposed to be about the infrastructure build-out, but rather the catastrophic risk of rogue AI or bad actors sabotaging AI infrastructure. In that context, Altman said that he does believe that the government, quote, should be writing insurance policies for AI companies. Third and finally, Altman addressed the question of why OpenAI needs to spend so much now and can't grow more slowly. He wrote, "We're trying to build the infrastructure for a future economy powered by AI, and given everything we see on the horizon in our research program, this is the time to invest to be really scaling up our technology. Massive infrastructure projects take quite a while to build, so we have to start now." Altman noted that even now OpenAI needs to rate limit their products and are facing a severe compute constraint. Echoing comments that we've heard over and over from Mark Zuckerberg, Altman wrote, "Based on the trends we are seeing of how people are using AI and how much of it they would like to use, we believe the risk to OpenAI of not having enough computing power is more significant and more likely than the risk of having too much." Finally, previewing some of the themes from that blog post that was released a little bit later, Altman wrote, "In a world where AI can make important scientific breakthroughs, but at the cost of tremendous amounts of computing power, we want to be ready to meet that moment, and we no longer think it's in the distant future." So how did the market respond? Former Trump White House policy advisor Dean Ball, who had jumped all over the comments when they were initially released, posted a long and thoughtful response touching on numerous points. He reinforced why the government shouldn't get involved in loan guarantees, taking equity stakes, or picking winners, partially because the failure of a major company becomes a big liability for the government, but also because it limits the ability for new and better competition to emerge. On the point of government insurance for catastrophic risk, Ball noted that the nuclear industry is the canonical example, and that insurance of meltdown risk is guaranteed in exchange for strict safety regulations. He wrote, "There are merits and demerits to this idea, but it's not a crazy one to consider for advanced AI." Ball also covered the policy maze of the government reducing the cost of capital for strategic industries, noting that this is already happening for semiconductor fabs. He gave the example of gas turbines, where the government doesn't provide loan guarantees or subsidies. Instead, to smooth over the notoriously boom and bust industry, the government serves as the buyer of last resort. That allows companies to expand with confidence that a buyer will be there in the worst-case scenario, but doesn't tax the government's resources in the interim. Ball said that he had advocated for this approach during his time in the Trump White House, and he could see this approach moving forward. He wrote, "This idea involves the government taking limited predefined risk. The political economy problems with this are non-zero, but they are far smaller than the regulatory capture that would ensue from the US government guaranteeing untold billions of OpenAI debt." Summing up, Ball noted that in the public interest proposals written by policy folks rather than live comments from executives, OpenAI seems to be thinking along the same lines. Rather than an open-ended bailout, they're proposing things that look more like industrial policy. He concluded, "I absolutely do not support open-ended guarantees of frontier AI lab debt. I absolutely do support targeted industrial strategy to lower manufacturer cost of capital if it A, exposes the government only to narrow, predefined financial risk, and B, seems likely to yield tangible and durable beneficial assets for the American people. In the case of my example," he wrote, "natural gas turbines to make electricity which is useful beyond AI, and which we need much more of regardless of AI." Altman seemed to agree with the premise, responding via quote tweet, "The government has played a role in critical infrastructure builds. Our public submission posted on our blog shares our thinking and suggests ideas for how the US government can support domestic supply chain and manufacturing. This is very in line with everything we've heard from the government about their priorities. We think US reindustrialization across the entire stack, fabs, turbines, transformers, steel, and much more, will help everyone in our industry and other industries, including us. To the degree the government wants to do something to help ensure a domestic supply chain, great. This is part of a national policy that makes sense to me. But that's super different than loan guarantees to OpenAI, and we hope that's clear. It would be good for the whole country, many industries, and all players in those industries." This all led up to the blog post, which was published on November 6th, called AI Progress and Recommendations. Now, notably, this post is from the company, not from Sam Altman personally, so presumably represents a broader official view for OpenAI. The post opened up by discussing the perception gap around AI. Most of the world, they wrote, still thinks about AI as chatbots and better search, But today we have systems that can outperform the smartest humans at some of our most challenging intellectual competitions. OpenAI discussed how in just a couple of years, we've gone from AI that can only complete tasks that take humans a few seconds to tasks that take over an hour. They anticipate that very soon, AI will be able to complete tasks that take days or even weeks. The other side of the equation is that cost has collapsed. They suggested that 40x decreases per year are a reasonable estimate for several years in the future. They also gave an update about what they think this progress translates to. In 2026, we expect AI to be capable of making very small discoveries. In 2028 and beyond, we're pretty confident we will have systems that can make more significant discoveries. Fields like AI material science, drug discovery, and climate modeling are starting to really develop along with health and education applications. The net of all of this is that OpenAI believes we are moving rapidly towards superintelligent AI, and in that context, they have a handful of policy recommendations to ensure that the AI future is a positive one. The first recommendation was that frontier labs should agree on shared safety principles and share safety research. The next suggestion was matching public oversight and regulations to the power of models. They presented two schools of thought. The first being that AI is a quote-unquote normal technology like the internet or the printing press, in that while it will change society, but the conventional tools of public policy should still work. OpenAI believes that the current level of model sophistication is still in this space, therefore should be diffused everywhere with minimal regulatory burdens. They suggested the need to promote innovation, protect the privacy of AI conversations, and defend against misuse. They also call out the risk of a 50-state patchwork. OpenAI also noted, however, a second school of thought, that superintelligence will develop and diffuse in ways and at a speed humanity has not seen before. When it comes to regulation, then, they write, if the premise is that something like this will be difficult for society to adapt to in the normal way, we should also not expect typical regulation to be able to do much either. In that scenario, OpenAI is calling for a multinational approach to safeguard against mitigating existential threats like bioterrorism, as well as dealing with the implications of self-improving AI. They wrote, the high-order bit should be accountability to public institutions, but how we get there might have to differ from the past. Along those lines, they said that the development of an AI resilience ecosystem will be required. They likened this to the way that the internet developed, not tamed by a single policy or company, but instead a myriad of initiatives created the field of cybersecurity that helped ensure the internet could turn into the useful tool that it is today. OpenAI noted that this didn't eliminate the risk, it simply reduced it to something society could live with and improved trust enough to make the internet useful. They wrote, we will need something analogous for AI, and there is a powerful role for national governments to play in promoting industrial policy to encourage this. OpenAI also urged better reporting and measurement around AI changes in society. They wrote, prediction is hard. For example, the impact of AI on jobs has been hard to anticipate, in part because today's AI's strengths and weaknesses are very different from those of humans. Measuring what's happening in practice is likely to be very informative. Finally, they noted a moral imperative to build for individual empowerment, writing, we believe that adults should be able to use AI on their own terms within broad bounds defined by society. We expect access to advanced AI to be a foundational utility in the coming years, on par with electricity, clean water, or food. Ultimately, we think society should support making these tools widely available, and that the North Star should be helping empower people to achieve their goals. So what does this all add up to? In my estimation, this is OpenAI also reading the room and seeing the rising tide of political discourse surrounding their industry and wanting to be even more assertive about having a hand in shaping the narrative. Because by any stretch of the imagination, right now, the AI narrative is very much outside of AI companies' hands except when they screw up. Politicians on both sides of the aisle have been getting louder and louder. Bernie Sanders has been tweeting about AI almost every week. One of his most recent reads, a major transformation of the economy is happening now. Billionaires aren't investing huge amounts of money in AI and robotics to make your life better. They're investing to replace you. Technology must work for all, not just the people who own it. On the other side of the aisle, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has dropped a half dozen tweets or more, being extremely critical towards the tech companies. He shared an ad from Meta promoting job creation as a part of data centers, with DeSantis adding that Meta would feel the need to run this ad is definitely a data point about the unpopularity of hyperscale data centers. White House AI czar David Sachs writes, if judged based on consumer adoption, AI chatbots are the most popular technology ever. If judged based on poll numbers, they are the least popular. Even the Pope is weighing in. Over the weekend, Pope Leo tweeted, technological innovation can be a form of participation in the divine act of creation. It carries an ethical and spiritual weight, for every design choice expresses a vision of humanity. The Church therefore calls all builders of AI to cultivate moral discernment as a fundamental part of their work, to develop systems that reflect justice, solidarity, and a genuine reverence for life. The point here is that in my estimation, we are quickly ratcheting up into a much more political moment for AI, with every move, every deal, every errant public comment wildly more scrutinized than anything we've seen from other technology fields in the past. That is the context in which AI companies are operating. So when it comes to the politics of AI, it is very clearly not a normal technology. Anyways, this is something we'll be talking about a lot more, I'm sure, over the months and years to come. For now, that's going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief. Appreciate you listening or watching as always. And until next time, peace.